Everyone, you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and I am your host, Andrew Davis, and this episode is sponsored by my very own t-shirt. You can pick this bad boy up right now. It is making fun of Gundam, Taco Bell, and the most interesting man in the world, and I figured it is fitting because a new Gundam trailer just dropped. So you can get this shirt. It's in the description up above. It's on Redbubble. Pick it up. I also have metal cards, which are super cool. eBay. I only have 50 of these left. So you can pick that up as well. So there you go. And without further ado, that's all I got for sponsors, guys. So without further ado, I have with me, I think, the creative team or people who have been involved in a very cool project, Gabriel, Valentin, and Ray Garza. And if I get your names wrong, correct me. But welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, I am very excited because you guys have a project that is on Kickstarter. It's almost 70% funded. It's going to be 70% funded by this episode ends. And I think you're at 67%, if not 70% at this point. And it is Digital Lizards of Doom. And a lot's going on with it. And I know the Kickstarter just launched a few hours ago. So what is the basic premise of this story? Because this is volume 3.
The story as a whole, or for specifically book 3?
So let's start with the whole story as a whole, because some people are hearing about it for the first time and they don't know anything about Digital Lizards of Doom. And what is the basic premise of where the story is, what the story is sort of dealing with, because it is super interesting. I just read volume 1. I'm in the middle of volume 2, and it is thoroughly enjoyable.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Andrew. By the way, Mark Bernal just texted me and he said, have fun. Tell Andrew and Ray I said hi. So, So, yeah, so Digital Lizards of Doom is an homage to just my favorite things growing up, video games, and not just video games, but that feeling of being transported to another world. And I always had an overactive imagination. So, you know, when I was playing games like Metal Gear Solid for the first time, or I guess even like Crash Bandicoot, even just like Tomb Raider, all of these adventure games, it's like the suspension of belief went so far beyond what it was supposed to. For me, it was like I was just all in. I was like, yes, like give it to me. Like I just, whatever it was, I was down. And so I wanted to, it was a challenge to try to recreate that feeling. I want to get a sense of that feeling with these books. And so the idea is that an ancient pineapple demon has trapped a bunch of characters from this universe inside a video game simulation. And he's obsessed with these characters, and they're all like these heroic, cool characters. And he's trying to he's trying to steal their adventures that they've been having in their real life universe, and and create the best video game and sell it to his planet. So that's like the overarching story that gets unfolded. But meanwhile, we just get to see the story unfold from the point of view of the characters that are trapped in the game. And so they're doing real things. They're fighting for what they believe in. There's evil and darkness and good and sabotage, and it's just a wild ride. And it plays out very much like a video game simulation, or like a video game would, and or a role-playing game, even down to the way the text is broken up, like you would read it in an RPG, or like an RPG turn-based combat style of game, you know, like a Final Fantasy Tactics or something like that, where the characters are like talking and then making these faces that emulate the emotion that they're putting forth. So that's that's the overarching story of Digital Lizards of Doom. And then the this story, Dana Deathly Level 3, the one that's on Kickstarter right now, is all about at this point in time in the story, these characters have they're looking for the secret weapon, and that journey is taking them to the planet of Weeping Dust, which is a giant donut planet with a coffee cup for a castle stuck right in the middle of it. And it's under the control of a mermaid. What's that?
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Oh, I must have heard like a weird echo or something. So they get to this planet, and there's this space mermaid who sings this song that's so beautiful that it causes people to be hypnotized, and she makes them drink her elixir, her magical brew that gives them eternal life. But if they should ever stop drinking it, they die. So that's
A lot
basically
going
where
on.
this story starts. Yeah.
So to even dive into this a little bit more, and what's super interesting is that obviously, the first volume, and we were speaking a little bit prior, it sort of sets up this entire world, and even the fact that we're in a game to some degree, and that we have this overarching pineapple demon who's trying to create this amazing game. And
Mhm.
then, well, pretty much we get Dizzy Doom, who becomes the hero and is sort of this, and I don't know the exact term or how it's pronounced, but it's sort of like the main hero that now has to go on this journey, and he is sort of kicked off, and his kingdom gets taken over, for lack of a better word. And so, what was this really like figuring out how to create Dizzy? Because that's kind of one of the main characters, and then there's a bunch of other subsequent characters that sort of come out of that help Dizzy, because we obviously have Dizzy now on this journey with a variety of other people trying to escape Commander EKO, Morta, and a variety of other characters, Mr. Empire, Dana Deathly, Fat Cat Rogers. And so what was this like, really building out all these characters, because this is their story. And it's like the group of
Yeah.
unlikely heroes coming together who would never or should never be together are now together to try to save the universe to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dizzy is like each character represents sort of a different emotion, um, personality. I mean, I guess every character should have its own personality, um, but Dizzy represents that character that wants to be truthful and honest and hopeful, and never gives up hope, and is always there to encourage. And from that, unfortunately, becomes um I don't want to say a victim, but he gets taken advantage of a lot, because there's like a naivete there that he doesn't have a ton of street smarts. He grew up a little bit sheltered, and he's worldly in the sense he has an understanding of the world, but he doesn't have the street smarts that these other characters who have been beaten down by the world have experienced. Like Dana Deathly, she in this book in level 3, you get to hear a bunch about you get to realize like what she's gone through as a character and why she has the worldview that she has. And she's trying to walk a better path. She has every reason to be a bad guy. She has every reason to be a villain, but she's trying to walk a better path. She's trying to do better. And but yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like we all struggle with as human beings. Like, we want to do the right thing, but sometimes we also just want to hurt the person who hurt us. And so this is like a way for us to have that conversation in kind of like I don't want to say watered down, but in a safe, all ages sort of way. that we can.
So to even talk about that, because obviously Dizzy has suffered a loss,
Mhm.
and Dizzy, I think, suffers the loss of his lover or his friend that he may be into. It's a little bit out there, but we don't know if that friend is completely lost. It's no spoilers here, and it's a little bit confusing what's going on with her, but Dana has gone down a certain path with
Yeah.
the Emperor, dealing with Morta and a variety of other people. And obviously, it becomes very, very interesting because the first issue sets things up. And then in the second issue, we get exposed to more things that are happening on this journey. And then, really, this third issue reveals a lot of secrets. And so, what is that like for you to then make this story a lot more interesting and a lot more complicated? Because the first issue is a very, very, the way I describe it, a very tame introduction, and then the
Yeah.
floodgates open up in a lot of ways. And things get complicated, and there's betrayals, and you don't know who's really playing what side by the
Mhm.
end of issue 2, and there's some stuff going on, and what is that like? Because we really get to now start seeing who these characters are and what they believe, what they don't believe, and how far they're willing to go. And that's what makes this such an interesting story. And I'm purposely being vague because if we really start going down into it, it sort of ruins some of the shock and some of the mystic and some of the colors. I'm going to just drop something really quickly to prove my point, but this is the type of colors and exciting stuff that's going on with it. And that's why I'm trying to be as vague as humanly possible.
I
And I think you
appreciate
can
that.
say, Gabe, just what you were mentioning earlier about like how Dana definitely could have had every and like she could have just as easily been a bad guy. I think it's totally in her design. I mean, you see her design and the way she looks. If you haven't read the book, she looks like a villain. Like she's so badass, and she's got the spikes on her shoulders, and she looks like a walking skull, like, and
Yeah.
she's a zombie as well. So like, it's so cool, and just the way that you sort of like subvert expectations of her being not only one of the good guys, but one of the most badass good guys in the whole series.
So to
Yeah.
even talk about that, because
Thank
I
you,
swear
Ray.
you're an artist on this. I am not an artist. So, I view things and I'm like, man, that's kind of cool. And I look at a character, you can instantly get the idea when you're a reader who looks like a bad guy, who looks like a good guy. And Gabe is obviously a writer. And so what was this like, really seeing Dana for the first time? And then also, I mean, you did a variant cover. We're going to talk about that in a second. But even to know and say, oh man, that was nailed, that she could have gone either way.
Yes, to me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm curious from the artistic standpoint,
Well,
as somebody
well, like
a creator, but just coming into the project, because that's something that's very interesting where another artist sort of gets it immediately versus the reader. Because I would imagine that you look at Dana's character development and even this picture right here very differently than a reader will look at it, or even Gabe will look at it in that fashion, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, well, I mean, like you said, I did do a variant cover for D Lot 3, Dana Deathly, and I mean, when Gabriel asked me to draw it, I immediately like saw it in my head. I had already read the first 2 books, and it just kind of struck me how much of Gabe's style and his writing kind of fed into my natural style. I mean, I'm always drawing these like sort of tall, slender females and like for some reason I like to cover them in like bandages or just like lines and things like that. And it's already very similar to a style that I naturally go to. So when he asked me to draw the cover, the variant cover, I jumped at the opportunity and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And it just sort of like fed into my own style. And the fact, like I mentioned earlier, that she looks like a bad guy, but is not, it's that whole like Mad Max thing, like everybody in that movie and that universe looks like they're just tough and evil, but no, there's like good and evil in that universe. And that's something that she represents as well, right? She's a good guy, but she's sort of like had her dark side, and she's had her brush with evil, and some of that rubbed off on her. And that's what makes her such a badass and so cool to just draw. She was a lot of fun to draw, and just kind of like to do my own experimentation with it and show it to Gabe, like, hey, this is what I came up with, and him being cool with it. So it was a lot of fun from my point of view.
And to brag about Ray for a second, his version of Dana Deathly has been adopted as like the new standard. So I asked him to do a side by side and of her, which is like a three sides of the character for future artists, so they can see, they could just get like her specs and everything, and yeah, like I don't know the way he drew her, and it's funny because I have these two side by sides, and nothing against the other artist who did those, but it's like the emotion for Dana wasn't there for that character. And I went to Ray and I said, "Hey, could you draw Dana like this?" And he just like totally crushed it. And it's like there's a spirit, like she's alive in the version that he did, and yeah, it's just really cool. So I think it would be a shame if Ray and the D-Lod world didn't meet at some point, and maybe we can do a book together.
This is so interesting, and I'm actually very curious because one of the things that happens sometimes is that a writer and artist have to go separate ways mid of a comic because they have a disagreement about where the comic is going or even the style of the comic, or that artist is looking for more money, or they just want to leave comics collectively because it's hard to make a living in comics from my understanding. There's not a lot of money, and unless you're really running a certain type of company or you're running thin margins, comics is not a place where you go to make money per se. um and so what is that like, that because it seems that I think you changed up part of your artist team, and that even going forward you sort of now have found a standard of what Dana should look like and what should be where she's at, and it's almost like you didn't really know where her character was going to evolve to and what emotion to be granted with her, and now you found that with Ray. And what is that like? Because you don't want to be disrespectful to the artist who developed her and brought her to life, but you also have to evolve the character. And that is tricky because people in comics have ego problems in a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
ways. So what is that like for you to figure that out and say, okay, cool, we got to stage one, for lack of a better word, but now we got to get, or level one is probably a better analogy, but now Dana's on level 2 or 3 and she needs a power up, for lack of a better word. No pun intended here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, what I meant to say was like, so the side by sides were done by different artists than the artists that work in the books. So the character designs, I got the character designs made separate from the artist who did the books. So I wasn't comparing anyone's version, like this artist did a better job than that or whatever. What I was saying is like specifically when I have a character on the character sheet, like the character Bible, there's certain emotions that I want to convey right away. Like I want to convey that Dana Deathly is in control, that she's a strong character, and that she's more than capable of handling the task, the job, the mission ahead of her. I want with Dizzy Doom, I want to convey that he's short, he's he's silly, he's fun, he's kind of more relaxed, he just kind of has a lackadaisical attitude. He may or may not be capable. You kind of have to like roll the dice with that character. So I was talking specifically about the character sheets. But as far as the characters, the all 8 books have been written since I think 2020. So the characters are not going to change. I mean, there's probably tiny things that might change, like get edited out, but they're more like scenes and scenarios rather than character developments. And to be honest with you, it's kind of hard because there are some things that um, that I about because the story is so tight. It's such a complete story. I hope that I still feel the same way as I make it to the end. That is something that kind of worries me a little bit. Like, oh, I wonder, I really hope that this was the right path, because you kind of hinted at this, but each book has these foreshadowings, and very strong ones, very, very strong foreshadowings. For example, if you look at book 1, there are these. This is a scene with Pineapple Pete, and the boxes that he's looking at, I guess on this side, there's like all these different genres. Where does it go? There's like anime and cyberpunk and puzzles and fantasy, video games. All of the boxes, including the music boxes, are going to be referenced later. Those are themes those are all going to be their own separate books. So it's like, because it's so tight, it's sometimes scary to think that, what if I get to book 7 and I realize I could have done something different at this point, and then I'm like,
But isn't that the whole journey at this point in comics, where you create a story? And see, this is where I have issues with comics at this point, is that I like the fact that a story is tight, because we have Batman now going on forever. And after a while, it'd be nice to have 12 issues, and then that story is done. And we're done with it, and we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to come back to it. And I have friends in the comic world who say, oh, I'm going to do a 6-issue miniseries, and then they expand it to 8, and then they make it an ongoing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, I'm like, isn't it nice to have something be that tight, and then it ends, and then it's not, I could have done A, B, C, and D, but I also went down path C, and I just stuck with path C.
Yeah.
And then
I have something to say about that.
No, I was just saying, yeah, it's good that it has an ending. I was just accentuating with my hand what you're saying. I didn't have something to say. I wasn't raising my hand.
Because I'm at the stage where it's great. I love an ongoing thing. I'm in the middle of watching Dragon Ball, and I'm going to kick it right into DBZ, and then I'm going to kick it right into Super. And I like the fact that there's a huge amount of content to go through. And I like the fact that there's going to be Super 2 at some point. And it's probably never, ever going to end as long as it's making money, and Dragon Ball Z makes a fuck ton of money. Yeah. Part of my language, I know your book's an all ages book, but I think everybody can. Yeah. I get one F-bomb on this one. I get one F-bomb, guys. But it's the idea that, though, at the same time, I watch a lot of stuff that's 12 episodes, and it's nice that it's over. And so I kind of like the fact that your story is tight, and I think it actually does make sense, and I think that it's framed well, and it's also framed like a video game, where we have those interludes where we have Pineapple Pete trying to make it a game, and that each episode is almost like a new save point, I feel.
Yeah.
And it's like the next level, and it kind of feels like, it's framed in a certain way that it does work, that it should not be an ongoing. Like, I'll be disappointed if you say, I really want to do another book, because if you're doing 8 or 9 books and you say, I want to make this an ongoing, it's going to feel like now we have 40 games in the series. So, I mean, like, I kind of think it works, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's something that, people are terrified to do. And what prompted you to say, hey, I want an endpoint? Because I think it does take a lot of balls, for lack of a better word, to say, I know that this is going to be a hit. And I think it was very successful. The first one, on Indiegogo did very well. And saying that I want to sort of table it after a while, and then I want to move on to something new.
Yeah, I mean, so thank you. First of all, I didn't you always hope that people respond well to your art and you create, but I didn't think it was going to be a hit necessarily. I was more like, I just want to make something really cool, like something that I can be proud of. And it's something I'd been talking about doing for such a long time, years upon years. Before the characters even had their names, I had this sort of story in my head. Before Dizzy Doom before Dizzy Doom's name was even Dizzy Doom, before Pineapple Pete's name was Pineapple Pete. I wrote a song back in I want to say 2008, 2007, 2008, and it was called Pirating Planets. And it was the first creation of Pineapple Pete. And this was like 2008 or 9. And his name, I think, was like Teddy at the time. And he was like this magical teddy bear that liked to mess with planets from different universes. And that I just never had the courage to like put it down to paper and write a book. And I finally just did it. And so little things changed here and there. So it having an ending was always the plan, really, because it was a contained story. It was like, all right, this is the catalyst that's going to launch these events, and these events are going to end here. And there is a universe that exists outside of the main storyline, books 1 through 8. And I feel like it'd be really cool to explore those stories. You know, we have about, I think I did the math the other day on a podcast, because I actually have a timeline of history that I reference for the books. And I think it was 28,000 years. There's 28,000 years of history before D-Lod book 1 starts. So that's a lot of stuff that can be turned into books and other adventures later that I would love to explore. But as for this particular story with Dizzy and Dana and Fat Cat Rogers and Shaky Spears, it was very important to me that it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. So, but it is, you're right. It's very scary, because I'm like, I got to cross-reference everything. There's not a lot of wiggle room for me to mess up, because, you know, there's already, you know, as both of you, I'm sure, saw, like, there's references to things that happen in book 2 and in book 1, and it builds each book. So like, there's things that happen in book 8 that are referenced in book 1. So it's like, I really, really hope that I get there and I'm like, cool, that was the right move. That's like, you know, that's a big fear of mine. But I on paper, you know, because I've read all of the books, obviously I wrote it. I've seen them all play out all the way to the end. So on paper, it sounds really cool, but you add art and you have to edit things sometimes. And, you know, a longer conversation might turn into a shorter conversation. And that's the stuff that scares me. It's like, oh man, what if, you know, the books are too big and I have to cut out this scene where this character gets this very important item, and then I have to somehow figure out how to explain that they got this thing. And so, but so far so good. Hopefully it's,
man, I'm just mind blown that you came up with all the 8 stories in 2020. Like, I can't even, like, the book I'm writing right now, I don't even know what's happening in the next scene until I'm figured out on the spot. Just the fact that you wrote it all beforehand is like, I don't even know how your brain works that way.
To even talk about that, because
dude, thanks, man. See, what's crazy is real quick, I gotta say the same thing. I know maybe this is just being an artist, but like, I look at what I did, right? And I'm like, God dang it, like, why do I have to write this way? And then why can't I just write as I go along? That would be so much better and maybe so much more fun. And then here you are saying the opposite, but
the opposite,
me,
yeah.
It's just funny. I mean, I feel like that's such an artist thing to do, is like, we kind of always want what we're like, we're not good at, or what we struggle with, or we see
the grass is always greener.
Yeah, the grass is always greener. It's like, oh man, if I could only do that, I would be able to do, you know. But yeah, that's hilarious, because I think that all the time. Like, I can't write a normal song, and that's been an ongoing thing since I was a teenager. Is like, man, if I could just write a catchy pop song, I know enough people where I could probably make a really good living, and then be like, oh, let's write a song together. And then it turns out just being super weird and crazy. And I'm just like, like, why can't I just, because I don't, I don't know. It's just bizarre. So there's parts of me where I'm like, not parts. Like I genuinely wish I could just like write every day, and then have it just evolve. And hopefully, maybe someday I'll be able to do that. But yeah, it's like, man, I could have cut D-Lot in half if I would have just written it as I went instead of taking like years to map out this whole thing. And it's weird.
So to even go into that, because obviously, if you know that we're on issue 3 or volume 3 is now on Kickstarter, and so we got 5 more volumes to read everybody who wants to read the stories, and you have an idea where that's going. That gives you a lot of freedom, though, I think, as well, where you then, if you're writing ahead and then before you start doing the art, you understand the pacing of the book. That also allows for a lot more control, how to break things up, even how to market it to some degree. And I also think when you're producing graphic novels, because if you're producing 24 pages, it is a lot less expensive than if you're producing 120 pages or 140 pages or 200 pages. And so I think that to some degree, you almost need to plan ahead when you're doing volumes and you're doing like a 1,600 page story. You kind of need to say, okay, I need to have a better game plan. And I go back to how Monday Night Nitro was booked, where they had to figure out what was going on Thursday to book Monday, and they needed to make sure what was going on the Monday before that Thursday. And that's how they were booking, is they were reverse booking everything. Meaning is Kevin Nash going to be hurt on Thursday. And if he's going to be hurt on Thursday, well, we could get him not hurt on Monday before, but then that next Monday he still has to be hurt, and then he needs to hold 2 shows to recover. And so I just find it fascinating, because I am very much a writer who wants to write 1 or 2 issues ahead of 24 pages. And so, but also I'm writing sort of a superhero story with a unique twist. And I got no problem telling everybody what the twist is. All my heroes their powers are based on money. And cool. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And issue 5 is going to be where things get real fun. And I think people are going to be like, oh, that's a really clever idea. Well, you did in issue 5. But
that's awesome.
With that, I can write direct, where it's a very direct story. And I think with your story, you kind of, if something needs to be referenced in issue 1 to set up, or volume 1 to set up volume 8 and have that big payoff ending, that's kind of what needs to happen. And you play video games like that, right?
Yeah.
And so I find it fascinating, and it's just mind-boggling to me, because I'm a writer who's maybe 30 pages ahead at once, not legitimately 1,400. So it's kind of crazy.
I guess it would be, if I had to do the math on how many pages ahead it was. Let's see.
You don't have to do the math. You can just take your word for it.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it would be like 930 is what I
Because that's still a lot, though. And I think it goes to the point where the world was really built out before. And that, I think, is a real advantage when you're producing a big project like this. Because we were speaking briefly before we went on air how expensive volume 1 was, and volume 2 was probably a little bit cheaper, because once you start knowing how to do things, you can find places where things get cheaply produced. And things also, when you set up your first book, it's always going to be the most expensive book by nature, just because you don't know what the F you're doing. I stopped myself.
You only got one.
Yeah.
I stopped myself, everybody. You don't know what you're doing in your first book. So that also, I think, is fascinating in that regard. That people don't understand how expensive producing comics is, and being ahead in writing is extremely helpful, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's funny. It's cool, man. I'm glad you guys are making me feel a lot better about it, because it's like
we'll tell you the truth off air, what we really think.
Yeah, because it's daunting. I'm telling you, like there's days where I'm like, why did I just write myself into a corner? you know, and I luckily I haven't, that hasn't been the answer to that question hasn't been yes yet, but I still have 5 more books to release. And luckily I'm wrapping up book 6 right now, like all the like editing and going through all the combing through it and making sure everything's tight. I'm going to start working on the storyboards for book 6 soon. And then getting those over to the artist. But so, and then book 7 is already in production. And then after that, it'll be the end. So it's, there's times where I'm like, man, I really hope I'm right. Cause that's another thing too, right? So it's a lot easier to, if you do write yourself into a corner, you can change a couple words. You can like change a couple things to be like, oh, that character's not holding that anymore. But once it's on the page, you know, and I get the artwork done way in advance. So, for example, there in book 2, the balloon sword, the clown general that he's holding a sword and it looks like a balloon. That was a bit of a scary thing because I'm like, this better stay a balloon sword because I can't pay for artwork again. I can barely pay for it the first time. So, you know, it's just kind of crazy. Like it gets.
Let's even talk about that, because then I think both of you can answer, because I haven't gone through paying for art yet or taking those risks. I am at the beginning of writing my story. And, you know, I'm going to go through and I'm also going to let my friends read it, even if they like the concept before they even like the writing. What is that like? Because obviously Kickstarter, and then there's a bunch of different ways. There's no right way how to do a Kickstarter, I would imagine. And I ran one for my show. And obviously there's a million things I would change on when I come back to Kickstarter, hopefully next November for a podcast. But the idea is that there's reactionary books where somebody says, hey, let me see what happens with issue 1, and let me see what people liked about issue 1 and what they didn't like, and then I'll write around that and then re-trigger it out. Or I'm 2 issues in, and then we're going to see how both of those issues reacted, and then we're going to hit issue 3, and if we need to make modifications, we can. Or some people say, screw it. I'm going to write my story however I want, and I'm creating for myself, and I choose to share it with the world. And if you don't like what I do, that's fine. This is my attitude with my show, is that I'm interviewing who I want to interview, or if people bring something to the table and whatever that is determined in my world is determined, but it's the idea that it's my choice. Most interviews I do, about 85% are my choice. And the other 15%, it's either it's a referral, I owe somebody a favor, or they bought in.
Which was this? Was this a favor?
It's a combination. It's a combination. But I wouldn't have taken it if they didn't mention a certain person's name. Tyrone's name. If Tyrone was not mentioned in that conversation, I would have not answered.
Oh, wow.
So again, it's what you know. It's also vetting. The money for me, I'm very honest, is a form of vetting. It legitimately is, because at a certain point you have to vet people, and especially given the caliber of guests that I get, it's I have to be selective and I have to be protective. But going back to my question, is that what is that like for you? Because running the business and even making those decisions, because if you say, screw it, I'm going to tell the story I want, that gives you a lot of freedom, where the only person you're answering to is, how do I get this funded, not how do I sell. Versus saying, you know, how do I sell the book? And I don't know if you're interested in going into, you know, a place like Scout or distribution at the moment. You're just saying, hey, look, I just want to tell this story initially, and then we'll worry about getting into more of a distribution chain after the fact, or as a secondary position, versus saying that also changes things. So I'm very curious what this is like, because you're dealing with real money. I mean, this project is going to cost you 80 grand one way or the other. When it's all said and done, if not more. And so, and obviously, you know, Ray, when you produce a book, you're putting real money into it too. And so I'm very curious on that level for both of you and how you can deal with that, because it's now not just somebody like my story or how I'm going to do the storyboards or the writing or pay for the art. It's also how am I going to get it funded and get it across the finish line? Because that's a whole different beast, is managing a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Go ahead.
Oh, you go first.
Oh no, yeah, just for my part, I mean, like I think my book was nowhere near as expensive as Gabe's, because I do the writing and the art. The only thing I outsourced was the colors, because at the time I still wasn't super knowledgeable of like Photoshop and just colors. It doesn't come naturally to me, so I hired out someone else, and I decided to teach myself in that time span afterwards to actually color. But yeah, so that was the only thing that I really paid for, and then the publishing of the actual book. So I didn't spend as much as Gabe did, but to answer your earlier question about like what it's like creatively thinking that far ahead, I mean, I think one of the best things is writing yourself into a corner. When you write yourself into a corner, there's no practical way to get out of it. That sort of like frees you up to like, fuck it, it's a comic book. It's not like a history paper, right? I'm gonna like think of the craziest, most batshit thing I can think of, and then like have that logic make sense for my universe. And then suddenly you come up with like some insane thing that you've never seen before, and you're like, wow, now I'm kind of glad that it wasn't this first thing that I wrote myself into this corner. So I kind of welcome that writer's block in a sense. After the fact, during it, it's the worst thing ever, and you're like, fuck, man, I shouldn't have gone this way.
Did you even get the idea? Because this superhero idea, I was writing another thing, and then it just came up out of nowhere. I'm like, man, this is brilliant. Well, what I'm going to do? And issue 5 came up out of nowhere. And then I'm like, oh, man, I got to write 4 issues to get to issue 5. And then if I get to issue 5, everyone's been, oh, my God, this is utterly brilliant what you just did.
Yeah. So and I go back and forth between those moods. I go like, oh, this is brilliant. And then like the next day I'll be like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. I'm a failure. This is going to suck. And then the next day I'm like, all right, and all nice and dandy, you know?
Ray, you just hit me up in those moments, bro. You just text me. You're like, yo, dude, I'm a fraud. And I'll be like, you shut your effing mouth. Like, you are not a fraud, bro.
I'll just call it a code red.
It's like imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been interviewing people for almost 10 years now. And obviously you have a lot of big guests, and it gets weird sometimes because I'm like, do I belong? And it's a really complicated situation for me, because sometimes I feel like I do belong, and then other times like, I do not belong in this interview. And the interviews that I feel like I don't belong, sometimes it's with somebody who's a big star, big in comics. And then sometimes it's with somebody who, for whatever reason, we're just not jamming. And then they're mid-level. And it's just like there's something off-putting about it. And it gets tricky because like you're like, do I belong here? Should I be writing comics? Should I be telling this story? And then also you go into the business side of Kickstarter too. Am I even qualified to run this like a business or run it successfully? And then also for me, and I'm curious what you think, Gabe, is that what happens if I fail? One of the reasons why I didn't run a Kickstarter and it took me almost 18 months to come around to the ideas. I'm like, what if I fail? And what does that mean for my brand? What does it mean for my show? What does it mean for respect in the industry, for lack of a better word? How are people going to view my show if I failed on my Kickstarter? And it took me almost 18 months to get over that. So I'm very curious how you feel about that, because that's also, I think, playing in a little bit. And then you're like, shit, I just spent 20 grand to produce something. What did I just do? Like, it's that too.
Yeah, man, it's terrifying. I feel like when it comes to Digital Lizards of Doom, I had a bunch of projects before this that I worked on. I was in different bands. I made different albums, produced a lot of albums, recorded guitar, sang vocals, and none of those things ever cost 20 grand, 25 grand, 30 grand like D-Lot does, but they were still expensive, and they were still incredibly challenging to make, and a lot of them did fail. Like they did, and it was hard. It was really hard. Spending months of your life working on something, in and out of the studio, mowing lawns, trying to get people to donate money, or working odd jobs. I worked at a grocery store for a couple of years, and so I could pay for this record, and it was a lot of work and a long time. And then you put the record out, nobody buys it. Man, it hurts. It's like it hurts, but at the end of the day, I just I'd have my pity party in that moment, and I would be upset about it, and I'd be devastated. And then, that would go on for, I don't know, a couple days. And then it was like, all right, I got to make the next thing. And then you just get back up and you go and you make the next thing. And, sometimes it feels like your tail's between your legs, and you had all these people you've been talking about this cool album, and you're going to go on tour with all these bands, and you're going to do all this cool stuff. And then it just doesn't happen. And it is terrifying and devastating. And I have that feeling every time I'm right now. I have that feeling right now with Dana Deathly, book 3, D-Love book 3. I have that feeling like, are people gonna like it? Is anyone gonna read it?
But let me ask you a follow-up question, because I'm now curious, because I just ran my first Kickstarter. I converted, I think, 9 new people who were not listening to my show, who were not guests, out of 38 backers, which to me is a huge victory. Now, I'm pissed because I didn't get 40. I'm agitated. I was 2 away, and I really wanted that 40 because it would have been cool, and it would have been an extra $40. It doesn't change my life one way or the other, but it's kind of a fun number, and that was the goal, to get 40 backers. But I also now realize is that, and obviously you ran on Indiegogo. I think you ran the second one on Kickstarter, but under a different Kickstarter, and then now you're running your third one, and I don't know if it's LDOD or Lizards of Digital Lizards of Doom. I get the names mixed up, so I apologize. But you have developed a following. So at this point, where 2 successful crowdfunding campaigns, the third one is going to fund. There's no question about that, because you are beyond the funding metric at this point, where I think it's in your first week. If you are over 50%, the likelihood of you funding is almost like 80%, and you are at least at 67, if not 70, if not more at this stage. And so does that at least help you calm down and be like, look, I've done this 2 times before. I have developed a following through music and a variety of other channels, and that there is a team behind you at this point?
I think having, I mean, there's, it's like this, right? It's like there is a comfort level, now, a little bit less stress, I guess, but it's like this: you're going into a fight, you're going into a street fight, you go in by yourself, it's going to be freaking terrifying. But if you got your boys there, even if your boys got your back and you're still going into a street fight, it's still going to be terrifying. You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, it's nice having lesser known comics on my side this time around, and I trust the team and I trust everyone involved, which it's just amazing. I haven't really experienced that before, and it's incredible to have those things, but yeah,
you just can't say you're happy that you got a break. That's all. Really, that's what this is about. You just don't want to give them any credit.
It's not. I don't know. It doesn't feel that way. It's not really a break, because you still gotta, I had a show last night. I played we opened up for Kyle Gass's band from Tenacious D, and that was amazing. And um, I had to work, I had to go play the show, I had to rehearse a bunch the past couple weeks, and then I had to put on a good show. And I love putting on good shows, but I wanted to make sure it was a worthy show, that the people who were paying for these tickets, even though they weren't coming to see me, they weren't coming to see Digital Legends of Doom, they were coming to see Kyle Gass. But it's like, I take that very seriously. If you have a responsibility, it's like, if we're asked to open up, we need to put on a kick-ass show. And so then after the show, you don't want to just pack up and leave. You want to stay for all the bands. We were the opening act, so I want to stay for all the bands. I want to support all the bands. I want to buy the band's merchandise. I want to, make sure other bands are getting stickers. And I want to make sure everyone had a good time. And then you leave with everyone else. You're the first ones there and you're the last ones to leave. And so with this, it's like, it's not even just about D-Lod. It's about what I have to make sure D-Lod is successful. Yes. But I also have to make sure that Ray is set up too. Ray's going on right after me. I'm opening up for Ray right now, so it's like, I need to do my job.
This is so interesting because obviously there's a lot of different thoughts in comics. And, some people say, look, I don't want to screw my artist over, but I don't owe my artist per se. I'm not the opening act for them. And I'm also not opposed to giving somebody an opportunity, but also I want an experienced artist to be on my book because I'm putting money into this and I don't want to take the risk on an inexperienced artist. And I take a whole different approach where I will give, with my book, I want to reserve a spot. If the economics make sense, where if an inexperienced artist on a cover wants to do me a cover, I don't mind giving them an opportunity on a cover if their rate is reasonable. So if a cover artist who's never done a cover is going to charge me $1,000 for a cover, it doesn't make sense economically. But I don't mind giving somebody an opportunity if they prove that they can handle it. I ask for samples and they're talented and they need some guidance. But it's very interesting that you say that, saying, look, this isn't just about me. It's whoever works on this book. This is a stone for them to step over, or a launching point, or even something to put on their resume.
Yeah.
Because there's people who say, look, I'm just paying my artist. I don't want to bash my artist, but my artist's job is to produce my comic book. And we have a good relationship, me and my artist per se. And not obviously not me, but hypothetically. But my job is not to further their career. They have to figure out how to do that on their own. And that is a fascinating position because I've heard it from other people, but I also hear writers saying, I'm building an anthology and I want to just get a bunch of artists and everybody's sort of boosting each other, but it's not my job to necessarily foster the next generation. So I find that to be fascinating.
Well, I think I'm already a fan of everyone on Lesser Known Comics, and I hope I get the opportunity to work with each and every one of them on something at some point. And if you're a fan of somebody, and you're friends with them, their gain is your gain. That if it's making them happy, then it's making you happy as well, and then their loss is also your loss. So if I would hope that my loss is also my friend's loss. Like if I get hurt, I hope my friends, not that I want them to get hurt, but I hope that my friends are like there to be like, oh man, like that sucks. And I don't know, I feel like there's just like a unity there, and
maybe I'm jaded, and maybe that's the problem here, is that I have seen, and I'm very honest with this, where people in comics have huge egos. And there's about 5 people I know in comics who really can't be in the same room together. Now, I take a different approach where my objective is that I don't really care about my ego. If I have to play second fiddle, but I'm making the same money, I don't really care at the end of the day, because I understand that, it's kind of like if I'm on a book and there's 5 creators and somebody wants to take the lead, but we're all getting paid the same, it doesn't matter to me. That's not what I'm in to get my money and not screw anybody, but I don't let my ego get in the way. But maybe that's why I'm jaded, because
I think it's one of the great things about. Sorry, I think that's one of the great things about lesser known comics is that, and I have never been in any other facet of the comic book industry, so I don't know about egos and stuff, but I have been in like film. So, and in film, it's the same thing. There's a lot of people, a lot of egos. But one of the things that's great about lesser known comics is that if we have egos, we haven't really shown them. And honestly, in all of our meetings and every time we all talk, the issue of money very rarely comes up. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Gabe, but when I've been there, like it's not even part of the lexicon almost, and we all just sort of like see how we can help each other out and just elevate each other. And hopefully, I mean, I think the goal is to eventually make that the norm into this industry where ego and money is a big deal. Apparently, we can sort of be the new generation.
It's not even so much money. It's what's happening and what I've seen. And maybe it's because I've been doing this for 10 years, is that person A feels person A and B we're good friends. And then they feel that person B dissed them or went into a different direction and sort of took their suggestion and poo-pooed it, for instance, and then put it down. But it's working for person A, and maybe it's not the right thing for person B, but person A feels that they stuck their neck out for person B, and person B sort of let their neck get cut off. And then all of a sudden that thing goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. 6 months later, you now have 2 people who don't like each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the whole thing. And that's what I've seen in comics, and I've seen it collectively over many, many facets with people, groups. And to me, it's stupid, because if something doesn't work for me, I have a social media strategy that's working. And I guarantee you that lesser known comics has a different one. And I'm not here to tell you how to run your social media. If it's working for you, that's great, but it might not work for what I'm trying to achieve. Yeah. And that's what I don't get. So that's just my experience. But
it's just too in the industry. But like, I think I've always thought that that's just those people, you know, if Ray all of a sudden was like a total dick, like I wouldn't be like or there would be 2 things, right? Out of nowhere, if he was started acting that way, I'd just be like, my first thought would be, well, this is the first time he's ever acted that way, and I've been around him a lot, you know, digitally, of course, but I'm pretty sure he must be having a bad day. I wouldn't think like, oh, screw that guy. I would like, oh, you know, maybe having a bad day or whatever. And then if it kept going, my second thought would be like, oh, okay, well, his art's still cool, and like his storytelling is still cool. And I don't know, I'm able to individualize things, and maybe that's just my own weird like sense of like self-awareness. I don't know what it is, but
I've tried. I can't do it anymore.
I've experienced those things too, man. Like in the music industry and in comics. I was on a pretty well-known publishing company, and I don't even really want to talk about those people, but like, yeah, I mean, I saw very similar things, and I saw ego trips that just blow my mind and do not make sense to me. Like for so many different reasons, it just
in my world, and I'm very honest, because at this stage in the game, for me, with even backing projects, I mean, I could tell you on a Kickstarter, I look for 3 things. I look, who is the person? Do they deliver on time? Are they a good person? Are they not a dick? You know, do they attack other creators? Do they attack their fans? Do they treat their fans with respect? Then I look at price of their Kickstarter. I look at the length of their book. I also look at how long is it going to take me to get my book. Because at this stage, I can go on Kickstarter and find 50 good projects in the next hour that are all 20 to 25 bucks a piece, which means, and I can not go wrong with any of them for $25. And so now I have to look further into things and say, okay, how do I differentiate? And that's where I look at ego, and that's where I look at all this stuff. And it's not that hard, because if you go on Facebook and you type in a creator's name, they're going to pop up. And if they don't pop up, that's kind of a red flag in my book. Not even just having a personal page, but having just I guess a friend thing or a profile, but even having a Facebook page. If their name doesn't pop up, that's a red flag. So that's kind of my whole thing, is that, and that's why I look at ego now, because I have limited funds to back things. And I want to make sure that I'm backing people who are actually good in creating things. And it's kind of like, I don't want to give a drunk a drink. And that's how I function, because that's not good for the community. That's not good for society. That's not good for a healthy ecosystem. And I feel, as a creator and a podcaster, and even as a backer, that I actually actively need to be a responsible backer. Yeah. So that's how I feel. And ego is something that sort of turns me off.
No, that's cool, man. Yeah, I agree.
But I want to back out of this, because I do want to talk about something else that's very cool with this. And you got some credibility with book 3, and some Ray Porter in book 3. So
a lot of Rays going around.
What's that about?
Yeah, so Ray Porter does the book forward for level 3, and I got a chance to meet him. We had a really cool meeting, and I sent him books 1 through 3, and he read them, and he told me when we met for the first time, he was like, yeah, I'm really busy right now. He's working on a bunch of stuff, film and audio stuff right now. And he was like, I was getting ready to tell Hussein, who was a friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours who introduced us. He's like, I was getting ready to tell Hussein that, I wasn't going to be available to do the intro. And I was like, just like, all right, And he comes back and is like, yeah, I read the book, and then I read the second one, and then he's like, before I knew it, I read the third one, and I had just been sitting there, and I read all 3 books, and he's like, it went by so fast. I didn't realize like how fast it went by. And he's like, yeah, I could smell the cave. I could hear the footsteps when the characters were walking around. I could hear glass breaking. And he's like, I just loved it. So, and then he agreed to do the intro, and yeah, it's an amazing intro, and I'm very, very thankful that he did that.
So badass. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I just say that's so badass.
Because one of the things that I think this does, and I think that this actually is very helpful, and I didn't get a chance to go through your entire Kickstarter, but this is something where this adds credibility to your book. And it's not just Ray Porter, Mike Towery, I think that's how you say his name, who was the co-founder of San Diego Comic-Con. Chris Killian also did the second book. Mike did the first. And then obviously Ray Porter doing book 3. It adds a lot of credibility to this project, where it makes somebody say, hey, I feel a little bit more comfortable that this is not some first timer doing a project, or somebody who had a cool book and did 25,000 on it. This actually has some merit. It has some teeth to it. It has some pop culture connections. And so what is that like for you? Because again, I kind of go back to my point a little bit, where this makes me feel much more comfortable. And maybe it's an institutional position, maybe it's a pop culture position, or maybe it says, oh, somebody is connected enough that now they have a Ray Porter doing the intro to something. Let me take a second look at this book. Let me pay attention to it. Let me actually go tell a friend that if Ray Porter's doing this, maybe I need to have my eyes on it and look at it. And maybe there's something more that I didn't catch on my first glimpse over it. And so what is that like for you? Because this could definitely make the difference between this book doing, 20,000 and 25,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of go back to, I don't know, maybe this is my downfall a little bit. I kind of go back to fandom and just being a fan of this stuff. I'm Ray Porter. Yeah, he's a he's a big name in the industry, but at the same time, I been a fan of his for a long time. You know, I love Zack Snyder. I love the Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and you know, it's just kind of cool. Like the Dana Deathley story lends itself to a voice like Ray Porter, and it was kind of more of like, hey, let's see if Ray Porter would be interested in this, you know, and just that would be really cool, huh? You know, and then just asking him and seeing what happens, and I'm trying to encourage other creators on lesser known comics as well to do the same, like just kind of get, and it's just, I just think it's good too to get a different voice, to an outsider's voice, to lead the reader into the world that they're about to experience. And maybe in my mind, I kind of think that that has like a psychological effect, like, oh, okay, this person just did an intro for this book, um and they're not connected to it at all. Let's like, let's lower some walls. They had a good time, maybe I'm gonna have a good time too. I think it has a little bit of a psychological effect on the reader before they enter the world. And so that's besides just wanting to work with my heroes and the people I watch and have respect for in the industries I enjoy. I think that's also just a really cool thing to have in front of a book. So
Yeah,
Do
no,
you have someone in
I
mind? Sorry, do you have
what's that?
someone in mind? So you have someone in mind for book 4?
Yeah, we have the person for book 4 too. Yeah.
Classic Gabe, planning ahead.
It's because I think it adds a lot of credibility, and I think it is cool, and I think it's kind of fun when you see a celebrity doing something or something, whether it's tied to that book or it's not tied. Obviously, I think it does add a nice touch to it, and it also gives me, and this is just me, it gives me more of a comfort level, knowing, and I know there's a lot of people who think like me, and maybe I'm a little institutionalized in that regard, where when an indie comic book, for lack of a better word, has a celebrity or somebody who is well known looking at it, I'm like, okay, there's something here. Or when there's a comic blurb from like comicbook.com or Bleeding Cool, I tend to stop. And maybe that's just me, but it also makes me feel more comfortable. So that's how I view it. But I think it's fascinating. But I do want to talk about rewards because there's a bunch of cool stuff going on with this. Obviously, there's $1, which is just a bunch of desktop backgrounds and iPhone backgrounds. So if you just want to throw in $1, you're gonna get a bunch of cool digital swag that can be thrown up there, a bunch of cool images that are surrounding the campaigns. You get the digital issue for Volume 3. You get a physical and digital combo of Volume 3. You get all 3 volumes digital, which is cheaper than the website on Lesser Known Comics. But we don't have to tell anybody that. We can keep that between us here and everybody who's watching. And then there's your variant that's out there, which is right here. I think that's the variant, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of cool because it's sort of the featured item of the Kickstarter. There's only 100 of them. It's $50, and it's a limited edition graphic novel. So what's the story behind this one?
Ray, you want to take this one?
Yeah. No, I mean, like I was mentioning earlier, Gabe came to me and asked me if I would be willing to do a variant cover for it. Or I think it was also through Mark, actually. Mark suggested it at first. And then I think Gabe was, yeah, sure, go for it. And I mean, that's when I called Gabe up and I asked him to send me the first 2 books, which he did. And I mean, after reading it, I just had it in my head. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of sort of like the Star Wars posters where like its characters sort of set up in a way that like they sort of make a triangle, or like the old classic Mad Max posters, you know. It's very it doesn't explain a lot of what the story is, but you kind of get it, you know, like you can tell who the bad guy is, who the heroes are, and who the sort of you don't know who like the guy at the bottom left could be, you know, but he looks cool, and the guy on the right, Captain EKO, like you don't know what their deal is. But like, so I did it based on that and based on like sort of the Mike Mignola Hellboy covers. So I ran with that sort of inspiration, and then it was just a matter of like kind of iterating. I had a background at one point, which is sort of like a sunset background, and at that point it just kind of got too busy. So I left it white until I could decide what I wanted to do with the background. And then after a while, it just kind of hit me like, no, white is what it has to be, you know? I love the contrast of the white with the space blue, you know, it really makes it pop. And the red planet in the back. I mean, it's just something that I use in my books. I mean, I have my book that I wrote right here. I mean, it's somewhat similar. I got like the planet on the same side and stuff. It's just sort of like, I guess what you call my style. But I mean, like I had a ton of fun drawing that in to the point where, like I mentioned earlier, yeah.
Oh, no. Well, what I was going to say is that one of the cool things about this is that it's limited to 100. And I kind of like limited edition things. Obviously, I'm a comic book investor, and that's kind of my jam. And I buy and sell a lot of exclusive books and exclusive comics that are limited to 250 print runs or 500 print runs or 100 print runs or even 50 print runs sometimes. And exclusivity means something because it's kind of like it creates haste that this thing could be gone. There's only 100 of these. You're now in an exclusive club. And also, it kind of just draws attention, I feel, where someone's like, oh man, there's only 100 of these books. Let me get this. And also, it is a bit of a higher tier item where it's not $25 for the standard. It's $50, which means that you need to, it helps get you funded on a Kickstarter in a lot of ways. And if you say, oh, that extra $25 might not mean anything, but if you sell 50 of these, well, it means something because it's like,
it's also a great way. It's also a great way to promote other artists, right? And to like bring a wider lens to like our collaborators and our contributors. I mean, I did this for Gabe. I think we're gonna have someone else do a variant for mine, you know, and that way we sort of like piggyback off each other, but like we sort of help each other step up a little bit, you know. We provide a bigger megaphone for our art.
Yeah, cool. And also, you know what? It just adds a different flavor as well. Because it's kind of nice when you have another artist that didn't work on the interiors doing a cover and putting it out there and having it and then saying, hey, this is a different interpretation of what these characters can be and are. And also artists have, you know, followings. There's a reason why. We were speaking about Zenescope before. There's a reason why they hire Ebass and Paul Green and Keith Garvey and Senku Manaki, because those artists have followings and people will go and seek out a Senku Manaki, whether she's at Zenescope or DC, or she goes to Marvel, or she goes to Dynamite. People will actually go and follow her art style, sitting with Ebass and a variety of other artists. And it's kind of cool when that happens. And, you know, obviously you're at the beginning of your career, Ray, but there's going to get to a point where people are like, I want a Ray Garza cover. Oh, he's on, you know, this book. I'm going to just come to this Kickstarter because of X. Or they're going to go on eBay and try to find this book. And that happens too. And that's also a whole different ballgame.
I wanted a Ray Garza cover.
What were you saying?
You got a Ray Garza cover.
Yeah, I wanted a Ray Garza cover. I was like, dude, good. When Mark told me that you agreed to do it, I was like, really? Like he's like for reals? Like, like, yeah, man, you know, we're all here to support each other. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so sick. Like I was all stoked. I am stoked. Yeah, I can't wait to hold this thing in my hands. It's awesome.
Same here, man. I mean, I already have, I think, like 2 versions of the book at this point, but I'm going to have a 3rd now.
That's kind of funny. That's kind of funny. And then obviously, I mean, I think it's a nice addition to the Kickstarter because there are people who say, look, it's $50. It's not also astronomically going to bankrupt somebody. If they want to go and upgrade and say, look, I want something special, it's not going to destroy their bank account, which I think is also nice as well, where it's still reasonably priced. And that's the other thing too. And I'm sure both of you have back Kickstarters and it's like a variant, and even 100 limited print run variant is like $100. And I've seen things that are like limited to 50 that are expensive. So, it's kind of nice in that regard. But even moving further outside of the book, there's also the starter pack where you get all the physical and digital books of everything. You get the comic books for kids, which is very cool. And it's a charity where basically you're buying, I think, the 3 books for a hospital, which is cool. I think that's a really, really nice touch in that regard. So, yeah. So, what was that idea? Really doing the
For the hospital thing for comic
yeah.
books?
I appreciate charity, and I appreciate when people do really cool things like that.
Oh yeah. So Mark Weiss, who's the president of Comic Books for Kids, I reached out to him a while back and just told him a little bit about Digital Lizards of Doom and told him what it stands for and that it's this all ages brand that puts forth these adventures that are hopefully thought provoking, and have a lot of substance to them, but but are also for kids and can teach these lessons in easy to digest ways, kind of like Flintstone vitamins or something like that. You guys remember Flintstone vitamins? Yeah.
I'm not that old.
What's
But
that?
I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. So just that kind of vibe where people can, or specifically children, can take in these more adult themes. I want to say, like, but things that they're going to be facing and going to be struggling with very soon, but they can have them in a safe, not like non-threatening way that can hopefully prime them for when they have to make some of these decisions themselves. And I feel like a lot of kids books used to be a lot darker, a lot scarier, a lot more intense. And I'm not saying I want to like make kids books just to be dark and intense, but I feel like there's a lot of lessons, I learned from these movies that I watched as a kid, and I think stuff is a little fluffy right now. And there's a lot of kids movies that um, they don't go to the same depth. I think Pixar is great. I love what Pixar does. Like Pixar isn't afraid to go to those darker moments. And I think for me, I really want to make stories that kids can be like, they might not even know what's being downloaded. They might just be like, oh, da, 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 it's so cool. He had to choose between this thing or that thing. And then when they get to see what a hero does, and then when they're faced with this choice or this opportunity to do the wrong thing and do the right thing, that they say, oh, wait, this feels really familiar. I know what to do now. Like this is what I'm supposed to do. And as opposed to maybe no one ever told them that before or how to approach these certain things before. So that it's just really important to work with companies that want to get solid and great literature out to children. So that's why we've teamed up with Comic Books for Kids, and we made a special tier for them. And I'm really excited, and I hope people donate a bunch of books to them because they're good people. They're doing good stuff.
Yeah, because it's very interesting in which that obviously you brought up a really fascinating point where I don't have kids yet. I can't wait. I'm going to enjoy having a kid. I think it's going to be a blast. But I also think that a bunch of people, and not to get too political, but I think a lot of people are terrified to sort of expose their children to the darkness of the world. And the world's a messed up place. And it's kind of finding that balance and how do you do that in the correct fashion. I mean, I'm 29. I grew up and I was exposed to a bunch of anime and a bunch of other stuff. But also when I grew up, I mean, it wasn't as messed up and it wasn't, I feel, as, I don't want to say dark, but the life has gotten more complicated, I feel, in the last 10 years. since I really started college, then versus when I was in third grade. And so September 11th happened when I was in third grade. So it is very tricky. And I would imagine that it's something I kind of struggle with. And it seems that you're trying to at least say, hey, here's a comic book that's going to at least prep up somebody, but not give them all a hell, but give them a little darkness and sort of plant seeds in their brains that help to further develop. And that's a fascinating entity because writing a children's book and books that are all ages are very complicated in comics. And a lot of creators don't want to do it because it's a different path monetarily, where you're not going to have a bad girl cover art. You're not going to go hire Keith Garvey or Elias Chazes or Ebas to do a cover for you. Not that way. I mean, I'm sure Ebas, it would be happy to do a cover for you, but I do not think it would be appropriate.
Nope, I doubt it. That'd be an interesting Dana Deathly cover.
that would be on the 21 and Plus Kickstarter.
Yeah, are we on a heavy metal? Do like a heavy metal like Digital Lizards of Doom edition?
That's issue 3.5 right there.
See, Ray's gears are spinning. I can see it. Heavy metal. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not even talking about changing the story. Just put a new cover on it and like make the cover like created it in 3.5. You'll make so much money that it'll fund the rest of your entire 5 books, and you'll be like, I should have done this earlier. Like,
that's awesome.
I'm just saying, this is what we do on this show. We create business ideas under the guise of an interview show.
I love it. I'm here for it.
But I actually do think it's very clever, and I think it's great that there's a charity component to it. And I think that I also hope people donate a bunch of books because obviously, kids, if they're in a hospital and they're dealing with some serious issues, a comic book could just take their minds out of the problem. And it's something that's also very helpful, I would imagine. And then furthermore, also, you have a local comic shop starter kit. So I think it's 9 books, 3 of each copy for retail. And obviously getting into comic shops is a big deal. And that's also helpful so that the comic shop can make money. They can distribute your books. And it's a win-win situation. And then you have your pull list, which is pretty much everything from lesser-known comics. And I think, is it all digital, or is it digital and physical, or is it a combination?
It's I think it's all physical. I think they're all physical books, so it's a hefty package, but it's awesome. I mean, you get Ray's stuff in there, you get Charlie Ragnarok stuff in there, you get the entire LKC catalog, and then I think you also get the 3 D-Lud books. So it's just this massive lesser-known comics sandwich, and it's an honor to be on the same publishing company as these just amazing creatives. So it's really, really cool.
Yeah, no, because it's $140, but I think it's, from what I've seen of it, and I briefly looked at it about 30 minutes before we jumped on here. It's a lot of books for $140, and if you sort of are looking at some of this stuff and like, hey, this is something that I like, and you go through the titles and you're like, even if you like 60% of the titles, you're probably going to be saving yourself some money in the long run. And you're getting, the stuff and all that fun stuff. So it's cool if you like lesser known comics and everything they're putting out there. Or if you're just looking and saying, hey, I'm willing to take a risk. That's really also in that realm. So that's helpful in that regard. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that I don't think we're going to get into, but there's music that you have that goes along with this, with D-Lod. So that's super cool. You got a bunch of music with that. I think you got stuff on YouTube. I'm sure you're going to have a card game, a board game, something else at some point. Everybody's doing it. It's a safe bet. I'm just saying. And I'm sure, Ray, you got a bunch of stuff as well with lesser known comics coming out that I'm not as familiar, because you came in like legitimately 20 minutes before we were supposed to go live. So I am unprepared for your side.
We'll save it for the next one.
Yeah.
Actually, Gabe, what do I have to do to get you to do a Tank McGregor song, like a rock band song for Tank McGregor, man?
Can it be? Does it have to have lyrics, or can it be instrumental? Can it be like a cyberpunk, like synthwave song?
I would love for it to have lyrics, but it's whatever you want.
Okay. We work on it.
You heard it here first.
I could do you an instrumental one easy, and you don't have to do anything for that. But for lyrics, that I got to make sure that's awesome. So I gotta spend some time on that. But
only if you have time, buddy.
All right.
Well, I'm gonna need a theme song at some point, and I don't have one yet, and I got to figure out how to even just put all that stuff into all this. And StreamYard's difficult, but for the podcast, I'm definitely getting a theme song. But that might be season 4 stretch goal in November if we do like 1,200. We're getting a theme song for season 4. But I digress right there. So you heard that here first as well. But I do want to give both of you an opportunity to promote what you guys got going on, because I know we spent a lot of time talking about a bunch of lizards trying to save the world and the universe. But where could people, find the Kickstarter, support you, find you guys on social media, go bother Lesser Known Comics, as well as you as well, Ray, with everything that you got going on? Because it's a lot of stuff happening in Lesser Known Comics between both of you and variety of other projects. And again, we didn't get to the music side of things, so all that stuff, whatever you guys want to promote. I don't know who wants to fight each other. That's all good.
Niobe says she wants a theme song.
Yes. Niobe does want a theme song, and Niobe just got a cosplayer that joined my friend Niobe, and LP just got a cosplayer to join, but. Nice. I'm sure we'll be at some point. I'm going to have LP on again, which is Niobe Comics. So, but yeah, you know who to hit up. Cool. Niobe Comics. You want your theme songs? So.
Yeah, my stuff is just pretty simple. It's just at DLOD World or Digital Lizards of Doom, all one word, on Instagram. But yeah, you can find it at Twitter and dlodworld.com. Pretty much it. What about you, Ray?
Yeah, you can find my stuff mainly on Instagram at Tank McGregor Comic. That's McGregor with 2 G's. And if you're interested in, if you like what you see in that art, you can go to tankmcgregor.com and check out the first book in the Tank McGregor series. You can see the first chapter there, and you can also purchase a digital copy or a physical copy if you like. That's tankmcgregor.com. McGregor with 2 G's.
And
then obviously, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, and then Ray actually has volume 2, which will be coming very soon. So we'll have some updates. Yeah. We'll have some updates on that as well.
And then obviously, and I've been saying it, you have to support indie comics. And what that means is the following. If indie creators have a Kickstarter going on, you need to back their Kickstarters, and that goes a long way. If they don't have a Kickstarter going on, but they have their books up on a website, on a Shopify store, up on an eBay store, or anywhere else where they're selling their books, at a convention, you got to buy their books too, because that goes into helping keep the lights on, buying supplies. Also, it tells them that you're interested in their stories. And a lot of times, a lot of these books, even after the Kickstarter, the extras goes right back into producing the project. Furthermore, if there is a Kickstarter that's going on, but you don't particularly like that Kickstarter, but they have a website, go check out their website, because that creator might have a project that you like. And again, that money goes indirectly into fueling that Kickstarter, and you'll be happy to pick up a book that you do like. Goes a long way. Obviously, Gabe and Ray both have books up there. If you don't want to back the Kickstarter, you're anti-Kickstarter, I don't know why you'd be that way. You can go on Lesser Known Comics and you can pick up these books. And you can pick up the first 2 volumes of Digital Lizards of Doom. And I think, Ray, your book is also up there. Or you can go to his Instagram that he said, and it'll direct you to where you can buy his books, or you can hit him up. And I'm sure that either I'll direct you, Gabe will direct you, or you can hit Ray on social media, and he'll direct you where you can buy his books. And that stuff is very important to do. But also, and I'm very honest about this, if money's tight in your world, we all been there. Sometimes money's tight and you don't have money on a particular month or a few months. One of the things is that sharing is free. Sharing out somebody's project, it is a click of a button, and you don't know who's looking at it, you know who's watching, and you don't know who's going to back it, and you don't know how big they're going to back. And so that's something to keep in mind as well, where sharing out projects goes a long way and it makes a huge difference. And if you do back it, share it out, because that also helps, because it lets people know that you backed it and that they should back it too because you backed it. So on that front, that's what everybody should be doing. Goes a long way. Money is not the be all end all. Sharing is just as important. As far as I'm concerned, obviously I appreciate everybody who likes, shares out this video. Means a lot to me. Commenting, checking it out, sharing it into Facebook groups goes a long way in my book. Also, I appreciate when people buy me a coffee. That helps tremendously, as it goes a long way in my world, because, well, running a podcast is not free. Running Facebook stuff like this is not free, and every little dollar helps to make this show happen. Also, you can buy my t-shirt if you don't want to donate. You can buy my nice Gundam shirt, guys. It is an awesome Gundam shirt, and you can buy it right now on Redbubble. And you don't have to keep it in black. You could have it in red, purple, yellow. You could have it in white. You could have it in any color you want, up to 16 different colors, and you could be the talk of the town with my t-shirt. And people will ask you if you are Earth Federation, because remember, in Char's Counterattack, it's Londo Bell. And yes, it rhymes with Taco Bell. So go buy my t-shirt. I need the money. And on that note, I don't know who wants to basically time us out. I don't know if you want to take Gabe or Ray, you want to take it, but who wants the final word?
Gabe, go for it.
I've done enough talking.
Let's high five. Let's high five and end it that way. We'll high five through the screen. Other way.
Well, wait. What? How is this? What am I doing? All right, here we go.
There we go. All right, ready?
Yeah, 1, 2.
1, 2. There we go.
There we go.
Hey, all right. That was a failure.
And on that note, that's a wrap, because we have been very successful throughout this entire interview, but the height of this was the ultimate high five. That's a wrap, everybody.
Awesome.